So looking at the organizers, I hope there's some salsa dancing organized for tomorrow evening. All right. It is my great pleasure to introduce our plenary speaker and a fellow chemical engineer, which I'm particularly proud of. I could spend probably 10 minutes just introducing our plenary speaker, so I will try to summarize her achievements in a few sentences. So please welcome Gilda Barabino. She's the president of the AAAS. And she has a lot of achievements. She's also currently the second president of the Olin College of Engineering. And she's held multiple academic and administrative appointments across universities in the United States. For example, the City College of New York, Georgia Institute of Technology, Emory University, and Northeastern University. She also holds many of the highest honors you can get in academia. Maybe the most recent one in 2021, she was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering, the National Academy of Medicine, and she's also a fellow of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. And this is really just a snapshot of all her achievements. So please, Gilda, welcome to the stage.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I am so thrilled to be here today as we recognize 4 very exceptional early career researchers. They were selected for their notable contributions to the life sciences and for what we believe will be bright futures that will one day enrich our world. We can't wait to see what they discovered to tackle the challenges we can't even begin to fathom. On behalf of AAAS and Science, I want to share how much we appreciate our partnership with our friends at SciLifeLab. For this special award, we would like to thank the Nutt and Alice Wallenberg Foundation for their generous support. But today, I want to spend some time delving into why we should redefine what it means to be an early career researcher. But before I do that, I want you to remember your why. I want everyone here to take a moment to remember why you chose to pursue science. Was it a curiosity for the world around you and for discovering the inner workings of it all? Was it the need to solve the challenges that plague your family, your community, or your country? How about the need to seek answers to endless sets of questions you thought science was best positioned to tackle? Was it the confluence of recent events that redefined our world and further drove home the importance of science for the betterment of humanity? Whatever your why, it can be a powerful force that propels you forward in your career. I want you to keep this why in mind as we think about what it means to be an early career researcher and why that definition and the systems around it need to evolve. To do that, I want you to consider the landscape these researchers are operating under and what it will take for us to better support them at this critical stage of their careers. I would argue that the earlier stages of your career in the sciences can sometimes feel the most insurmountable and perhaps the most nebulous. The past few years have also compounded that uncertainty, particularly in the life sciences. The need to physically be in the lab to conduct research certainly was a factor for some PhD students delaying their work and ultimately graduation. Then comes the big question after graduation. Now what? How do I take my PhD and turn it into a rewarding career? For those pursuing postdocs, work-life balance can be a major concern. And unfortunately, overworking is a common practice, but not always for the reasons we think. Are postdocs driven? Absolutely. But the pressure to work longer hours has more to do with a competitive landscape with limited positions and funding, a status quo that expects a certain level of effort day in and day out, and a feeling of not progressing fast enough. And let's not forget the pressure to publish. No matter what stage of a career you're in, achieving that balance can be a challenge. But that is especially true if you feel like you need to sacrifice certain aspects of your life to achieve success and pursue the right path early in your career. That pressure can feel daunting, and time management becomes even more critical. What signal are we sending to the largest part of the scientific workforce if we don't change the culture of expectation? Add to the challenges around pay. It is no secret that scientists pursuing a career path right after achieving their PhDs are not making the kind of pay to comfortably afford living expenses or much of a life outside of the lab or the lecture hall. That becomes even more challenging if you look at the pay gap that persists for women. Trying to start and grow a family during this stage of a career can feel especially challenging, including trying to afford childcare on those starting salaries. If you're pursuing an academic path, a few things become clear early on. There are a finite amount of faculty positions available, and the path to tenure track can be harder still. Pursuing grants and trying to get published in peer-reviewed journals are critical to having a successful career in academia. But this publish or perish world, in that world, the cards can be stacked, especially if you're not in a well-funded research institution. As open access journals continue to grow in scholarly publishing, the financial burden to publish has increasingly shifted to authors and their institutions. The White House Office of Science and Technology Policy released guidance for the United States federal agencies this past summer to ensure that federally funded research and accompanying data can be made available to the public immediately upon publication. That will contribute to an already accelerated global move to open access publishing. So AAAS strongly supports public access to research. We believe equitable access to publications and publishing opportunities are important to ensuring scholarly publications represent the diversity of scientists conducting research and a wide variety of scientific disciplines. For that reason, AAAS has been advocating for a more equitable landscape for authors and readers. Early career researchers are at a disadvantage when it comes to one of the models that is becoming increasingly popular. That model, gold open access, requires authors to pay author processing charges, or APCs. Under this model, researchers must pay somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $11,500 for an APC to get just one paper published in a high-quality research journal. AAAS recognizes that high APCs will perpetuate inequities, as it is a steep price for a variety of researchers to afford, including those who are earlier in their careers and may be poorly funded, not yet tenured, or more diverse. On the other end, low APCs will diminish the quality of the peer review process. To better understand the landscape around APCs, AAAS fielded and released results of a survey this past September. 422 respondents encompassing U.S. researchers, librarians, and administrators. Our survey revealed the following hidden impacts of APCs. Nearly 2/3 of those surveyed do not budget for publishing costs. For those who have paid these charges, more than half found it either difficult or very difficult to obtain funds. Smaller institutions with less than 10,000 students were 3 times as likely to find it difficult or very difficult to obtain these funds. When it comes to paying APCs, nearly 70% use grant funds, and women were 3 times as likely as men to use those funds. We also saw trade-offs when it comes to professional development. More than 3/4 of researchers reported foregoing purchases of materials, equipment, or tools to pay APCs. And nearly 60% reported not attending workshops or conferences relevant to their work. Compared with men, women were more than 2.5 times as likely not to attend workshops and conferences so that they could cover APCs. Now, consider this data against the backdrop I just shared with you for early career researchers. Given the publish or perish landscape, overworking, less grants and funding options, and less professional development opportunities early on, this can be especially challenging if APCs become a prevalent method for research to be published. So while we also strongly support the open data movement, it can be trickier if you're a young investigator. So what happens when your data is shared before you have a chance to publish? Does that negatively impact your ability to establish your career? It can be frustrating when principal investigators are sharing that data since they see minimal impact to their careers because they're already established in their fields. I want you to consider one more layer to the early career landscape. Imagine how much harder this entire experience would be if you're from a community or background that is underrepresented in the scientific community. Some of you may know and don't have to imagine. You already know how much more challenging that landscape may be. To understand these challenges, we need to take a brief step back. So let's examine the scientific process for a moment. Individual scientists and communities of scientists who drive the scientific process are influenced by the societies and the social groups in which they live and work. Those who are currently included in the scientific ecosystem have a say in who participates in and who benefits from science and who can set the agenda. And unfortunately, history has provided cautionary tales when we have excluded parts of our society from the work and conduct of science and scientists. So when looking at the general picture regarding representation, it's not surprising to learn that scientists from disadvantaged groups are being paid less, promoted less often, and disproportionately having careers in STEM and medicine. So that's why it's incumbent upon all of us in the scientific enterprise to play a role in addressing the persistent challenges at this stage of STEM and medicine careers in the continuum, and we must also work to create a more inclusive environment. But we're only one part of the equation. Those of you who are just launching your STEM and medicine careers have an opportunity to reimagine. You can think about how that career is going to play out currently and in the future. So let's start with what you can do as an early career researcher. To do that, I like to bring it back to what I asked when I began this talk. What is your why? Keep that in mind. What made you decide it was worth the gamble? I imagine for some of you, it's becoming increasingly harder to stay motivated, especially given everything I just shared. Is it possible that you are envisioning one main path to apply your PhD? For many young investigators, a tenure track position at an academic institution seems to be an ultimate goal. But with limited positions and funding, how many are actually going to seek or achieve that coveted spot? There are multiple paths that we should all consider that can enable one to apply their expertise and make a difference, but not all of them are well understood or widely promoted. Here are some questions and scenarios to guide whether it's time for you and others to revisit the path you're currently pursuing. Are you concerned about the environment and our ability to address climate change? Has your research explored emerging issues in the natural ecosystem that might give us new clues to explore to tackle threats to our planet? Then you might want to consider pursuing a policy fellowship at a governance agency where you can leverage your skills and expertise to help provide scientific guidance to inform policy making around climate change. Have you been specializing in RNA structure and function? We know from the pandemic that RNA technology holds a lot of promise beyond just a vaccine treatment. With an increasingly polarized world and with a technology that's not easily understood, we will certainly need scientists who can clearly and succinctly extol its benefits. Are you active on social media and love making complex problems and processes more approachable to the general public? Perhaps a career in science communication is the key to marrying these two interests. We need that skill more than ever now. What I'm asking you to do is explore the possibilities. Ask yourself if there are other ways you can broaden the benefits of science for society beyond the traditional path. I also think it's important to remember that the burden does not rest with you alone. We need to broaden our perspectives when it comes to how we define who an early career researcher is and what that path might look like. It could look like an industry scientist. It could look like a subject matter expert at a nonprofit. Beyond imagining your career path, it makes a difference whether you're recognized and supported early in your career. Part of that comes from having a mentor. You just heard about that, who can serve as an advocate and open doors. People often think of mentors in the traditional sense, someone who takes you under their wing directly, and in some cases even grows to become a surrogate parent, a parental figure in your lives. But I would encourage you to expand your definition of mentorship and where you find them. A mentor doesn't have to be someone strictly in your field, or even in the scientific prize altogether. It could be someone 10, 20, even 30 or 40 years your senior who's walked in your footsteps. Someone who graduated with challenging career prospects and found their way to a life of success and fulfillment. In speaking with them, you'll often find their roads were quite different from the ones they expected when they were at your career stage with similar ambitions. And it was their willingness to go on with the flow and flexibility and adapt to life's twists and turns that delivered the success they enjoy. These mentors can be found in your community, among your relatives, and those you'll meet this week. Of course, mentorship within the scientific enterprise is critically important as well and has many of its own independent merits. Conversations with those who've been published in our field, who understand the ins and outs of advancement in academia, and who know how to best present their ideas are invaluable. So are conversations with experts who might have gone down a non-traditional career path. They could reveal a new way to apply your skills in ways you never imagined before. And there's another way to get the right boost that can transform not only your career, but also how you see yourself. And of course, that boost comes in the form of awards and other visibility. And that's why I'm so proud to be here today to celebrate the achievements of these 4 notable scientists and why AAAS in science are so invested in supporting early career researchers through awards like these. We know what can happen with the right visibility. It can lead to more funding, career opportunities, or speaking engagements. It's important that you keep seeking opportunities to get your research recognized. It is very clear that that will open doors that you never thought were possible. It's not enough to be recognized, though. We need to expand who can join our scientific community, too. You can help bring others along with you. First, let's talk about barriers to expanding representation in the scientific enterprise. There's a landmark paper that's very important. It describes a study in 2017. It's often referred to as the Lost Einsteins paper. In that paper, it shows a predictor of someone getting a patent in America is less about aptitude and interest and has more to do with a person's socioeconomic class, race, and gender. So researchers in that study linked patent records with income tax records to test their theory. And unfortunately, many potential inventors are being left out, is what they found. This phenomenon is not limited to the United States. I'm confident that a survey of innovation landscape in Sweden, the broader European community, and across the globe would reveal a similar picture. The researchers conclude that innovative output would increase if we expose more young children to inventing, particularly girls and children from low-income families and underrepresented communities. To build on that study, potential scientists need to be identified and nurtured throughout their careers. To illustrate this point, I want to share a perspective from an individual, Karen Berg, a scientist with 7 patented inventions whose efforts are addressing the imbalances of inventing and patenting. She's been particularly focused on engaging students from different fields of study to collaborate so they could do bigger things together than they could do on their own. Berg also served as an invention ambassador through the AAAS, the world's largest multidisciplinary scientific society and nonprofit publisher of the Science family of journals. To say a little bit more about Karen Berg and her work, with design and analysis assistance from more than 50 graduate and 80 undergraduate students, Berg, a biomedical engineer by training, invented and developed a benchtop engineered tissue system that enables customized and personalized therapies for patients. This innovation has been commercialized as a diagnostic that helps diseases become more quickly identified and addressed. Inspired by the Lost Einsteins paper, AAAS featured Dr. Berg in a panel at our annual meeting a few years ago, along with 2 other academic inventors who discussed why they promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in inventing. And in an interview with Forbes, Dr. Berg shared her experience working with undergraduate researchers from populations in STEM and medicine. She noted that at least half of these researchers have been first-generation college students, and many come from low-income rural communities. She explained that these students are scrappy, smart, and innovative because they've had to be in order to survive. But they don't consider themselves inventors, even though many of them have already applied innovative techniques to ensure their survival. While these researchers didn't have the same tools, opportunities, and resources as their peers in middle and upper class homes, they still found a way to create and innovate. But the trouble is, finding them and cultivating their skills is hard to do because they can be easily overlooked and their innovative ideas may not be as recognized as those who are more traditionally funded. These students graduated, moved on in the scientific community, and are now driving innovations and exploring solutions in their fields. They also serve as an inspiration to their communities. But what if they weren't found Einsteins? What contributions would we have missed? The Lost Einsteins paper also talked about the importance of inspiring girls to become scientists and engineers. So let's examine the gender gap when it comes to inventing. A study published last year in Science estimates that there would have been roughly 6,500 more women-focused inventions to help women navigate all manner of health issues and beyond if patents were invented between men and women equally from about 1975 onward. Women were represented in only 25% of patents during that time. The researchers show that women inventors are more likely to produce patents to solve problems that specifically or disproportionately affect women, such as menopause or fibromyalgia. Beyond recognizing the loss of human talent that arises when women are underrepresented in innovation, this finding highlights the types of problems and solutions that are overlooked in the current system with its institutional imbalances. So what do both studies reinforce? That we need to support early career researchers and more groups who may feel excluded from pursuing science and engineering. We need these different groups articulating problems as they see them and applying themselves to the solutions. Beyond expanding the base of who can pursue science, we also need to encourage a multidisciplinary approach to solving challenges. Doing so would help us broaden the way scientists creatively tackle challenges. At Olin College, where I'm president, we have a saying: we need to think across disciplines and boundaries. When you connect a social scientist with an engineer, for example, that's where true innovation happens. This is something that I actually have focused on since my graduate work exploring solutions for sickle cell disease. Back then, I knew I had to move beyond engineering, the lab, and beyond the clinic. I knew I needed to ask social scientists how to reach the population affected by the disease. I thought of my work as human-centered engineering. I applied my engineering background to a medical challenge, and I picked a disease which largely affects African Americans. When I was working on sickle cell disease, I didn't just consider the burden of the disease. I also considered the burden of racism and other social dynamics at play. I engaged with communities and advocacy groups tackling sickle cell disease. I wanted to understand the inequalities and the health disparities impacting our ability to successfully address the disease. I knew that to employ good science, I needed to understand all facets of the challenge I was attempting to solve. This experience has informed my perspective on the need to transform and redesign systems to include those who are traditionally excluded. That is also what attracted me to join AAAS, which is leveraging its multidisciplinary strength to address STEM and medicine inequities using a systems approach. Among the things that AAAS is addressing, it leads initiatives that span elementary, secondary, and post-secondary education to increase access, engagement, and success across STEM and medicine pathways for underrepresented groups. We partner with other organizations and federal agencies that shape STEM and medicine, as it will take a more holistic and concerted effort to transform systems to make them more inclusive. As part of that effort, we are committed to changing the scientific landscape, broadening the scope of those who see themselves as scientists, and ensuring young researchers in particular feel supported. And this is where each and every one of you come in. We want to move away from the focus on aspiring scientists as individuals and focus on what we can accomplish as a community, how our ecosystem of budding and established scientific minds can work in unison and help the next generation make its mark in our field. We want to foster more dialogue, more collaboration, and more cross-pollination of mentorship, advocacy, and relationship building. We want to make sure each and every one of you understands that none of us are on islands unto ourselves. We are all part of the scientific family. Your success is our success, and our attention and resources will be dedicated to seeing this vision through in the months and years ahead. We intend to do whatever possible to encourage you in your pursuits, as we've done with the 4 winners here. And I'd encourage everyone here to ask ourselves, what can I do personally to help early career scientists advance in our field? Together, we form a collective that's quite literally changing the world. And now it's incumbent upon us to ask ourselves, what can we do today? What relationships can we build? What seeds can we plant that will help change in a generation from now? The seeds that were planted in the late 1980s and 1990s at events just like these paved the way for many of the breakthroughs that we see today. So I'm going to ask again, in light of this call to the community, that we all examine, that you winners in particular, examine your why. Why did you choose this field? What does it mean to you? And from this place of purpose and passion, ask yourselves what you can do personally to move the enterprise forward. For you and the person sitting next to you, what introduction can you make? What piece of advice can you give? What words of encouragement can you provide? Who can you bring along with you? I can't wait to see where the wind takes you, what remarkable careers and innovations lay ahead, the world-changing breakthroughs that will spring directly from this room. It's all within your grasp. You know this, we all know this. You are the best and brightest amongst us, and we are all here to support you and your journey. Your why will be joined by our how, and the world will be a better place for it today, tomorrow, and in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that inspiring journey. I maybe want to connect a little bit to our discussion that we had over coffee, where we also discussed the possibility to not only choose one path, but to transition between paths and have more exchange, for example, between industry, academia, and clinical work. Could you maybe comment a little bit on that?
I think it's very important for us to not put up unnecessary borders, barriers, boundaries. And the more that we blur them, the better. I, like my colleague here, we've had some experience in both industry and the academy. And being able to use the basic science in an applied way requires us to work with those who are more practitioners, those in industry. You heard from our talks earlier from our winners how important it is to engage with those who might be from a clinical background, so that we are applying our work in ways that make the most sense. So what I think is most important as we're moving forward is to work across disciplines and boundaries and not see ourselves narrowly in one or stuck in one. Like, we can always move from one area to another. You may not see yourself in someone else's shoes in a particular area one day, but you never know where that wind's going to take you. You may, in fact, be in that other area, and we can go back and forth. One of the things that I'm trying to get people in the academy and industry to do in particular is to share much more regularly, so that we in academia better understand industry and how we prepare people to enter industry, and that those who are in industry work with us in academia more, so that we understand, again, how to do the preparation, and that constant exchange will help all of us.
And I would like to round off maybe asking you the same question we asked our winners. So if you would time travel back to your younger self, what piece of advice would you give?
To my younger self, I would have said, be more adventurous. I felt like I was so worried about a particular path and what I had to do and had to be successful and had to adhere to norms, even if it was someone else's norms, not necessarily mine. And I would have told my younger self, go for it. Don't be so constrained. Follow that passion and really just be more free and willing to take chances.
Thank you so much. Please remember.
Thank you all.